Semmelweis, Medical Mystery, Vienna, 1846. In the heart of the sprawling Austrian Empire, the Vienna General Hospital stands as a beacon of modern medicine. It's a place of learning, of progress, of hope. But within its celebrated walls, in the state-of-the-art maternity division, a silent, invisible killer is stalking the halls. New mothers, who should be cradling their newborns, are instead succumbing to a horrific illness, one that turns the miracle of childbirth into a virtual death sentence. They call it puerperal fever, or childbed fever. It begins with a chill, a fever, and agonizing abdominal pain. Within days, it escalates into a raging infection, delirium, and a slow, painful death. This isn't a rare occurrence, it's an epidemic. In some months, 1 out of every 6 women who gives birth here will die. The air is thick with the stench of sickness and the heavier, suffocating weight of fear. Into this chamber of horrors steps a young Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis. He's ambitious, intense, and deeply troubled by what he sees. He's not just a doctor, he's a man haunted by the faces of the women he cannot save. Every death feels like a personal failure, a stain on his conscience. While his senior colleagues seem resigned to these deaths, attributing them to an unavoidable consequence of childbirth or some mysterious atmospheric condition, Semmelweis cannot accept it. He sees the pattern, the sheer scale of the tragedy, and believes there must be a rational, discoverable cause. His mind, trained in logic and observation, begins a desperate search for an answer, a quest to solve the hospital's most deadly medical mystery. The hospital's maternity division is bizarrely split into 2 separate clinics. The first clinic is the prestigious one, staffed by physicians and medical students. It's where the future doctors of the empire are trained. The second clinic is run exclusively by midwives. The division was made to separate the training of doctors and midwives, but it has created a terrifying natural experiment. In the first clinic, the death rate from childbed fever is astronomical, frequently soaring above 10%. Sometimes reaching a horrifying 18% or more. In the second clinic, run by the midwives, the rate is consistently and dramatically lower, often less than 3%. The difference is so stark, so undeniable, that women beg and plead not to be admitted to the doctor's clinic. They would rather give birth in the streets than face the near certainty of the doctor's plague. Semmelweis is consumed by this discrepancy. The staff, the equipment, the very air they breathe, it's all the same building. So what could possibly explain why a woman's chance of survival depends entirely on which door she enters? He begins his investigation with a relentless, methodical obsession. He is a detective, and the hospital is his crime scene. First, he considers overcrowding. It seems plausible. The first clinic is often more crowded. But he checks the records and finds that even when the second clinic is more packed with patients, its death rate remains low. Overcrowding is not the answer. He moves on. Could it be the birthing position? The midwives in the second clinic deliver mothers on their sides, while the doctors in the first clinic deliver them on their backs. It's a long shot, but he is desperate. He orders the mothers in his clinic to be delivered on their sides. The result? Nothing. The death toll continues its relentless climb. He investigates diet, ventilation, even general laundry practices. Each theory is tested and each one fails to explain the deadly anomaly. One of the most popular theories at the time is psychological. A priest, when called to administer last rites to a dying woman, has to walk through the 5 wards of the first clinic to reach the patient. The sight of the priest and the sound of his solemn bell, it is argued, terrifies the new mothers, weakening their constitutions and making them susceptible to the fever. Semmelweis, clinging to any possibility, tests this as well. He has the priest change his route, coming through a back way so that he is neither seen nor heard by the other patients. The women are calmer, their spirits higher, but their bodies still fail them. The death rate doesn't budge. The killer is not fear. It's something physical, something tangible. But what? The prevailing medical wisdom of the era offers no help. Doctors speak of miasmas, invisible clouds of bad air that rise from the earth and spread disease. They talk of humoral imbalances and cosmic terrestrial influences. To Semmelweis, these are just fancy words for ignorance, a way of shrugging their shoulders at a problem they can't be bothered to solve. He knows the answer is right in front of him, hiding in plain sight within the daily routines of the hospital. But the more he looks, the more the truth eludes him, and with every passing day, another mother dies, her name added to a list that is growing far too long. His frustration mounts, bordering on despair. He is surrounded by death, and the one place that should be a sanctuary of life has become the deadliest place in Vienna. Handwashing discovery, ridicule. The breakthrough, when it finally came in early 1847, was born from tragedy. Semmelweis's close friend and colleague, a pathology professor named Jakob Kolechka, was conducting an autopsy when a student, distracted for a moment, accidentally pricked his finger with a scalpel. It was a minor wound, a common mishap in the dissection room. But within days, Kolechka fell gravely ill. Semmelweis watched in horror as his friend's condition deteriorated, his body racked with a raging fever, chills, and the same telltale signs of massive infection he had seen in countless dying mothers. When Kolechka died, his own autopsy revealed a pathology identical to that of the victims of puerperal fever. In that moment of grief, everything clicked into place. The scalpel had been contaminated. It had been used on a corpse, and it had introduced something from that dead body into his friend's living tissue. Semmelweis's mind raced, connecting the dots with electrifying clarity. What was the one major difference between the first and second clinics? The doctors and medical students in the first clinic routinely began their days in the autopsy room, performing dissections on the deceased. Afterwards, they would move directly to the maternity ward to examine pregnant women and deliver babies. The midwives of the second clinic, however, never performed autopsies. The connection was as simple as it was horrifying. The doctors themselves were the carriers of death. They were bringing what Semmelweis termed cadaverous particles from the morgue into the delivery room on their unwashed hands, unknowingly transmitting the fatal infection directly into the bodies of the mothers during examinations. It wasn't a miasma in the air, it was a poison on their very fingertips. Armed with this revolutionary, terrifying insight, Semmelweis knew he had to act. He couldn't yet prove the existence of microscopic germs. That science was still decades away. But he had overwhelming evidence of a cause and effect. He needed a way to cleanse the hands of the physicians, to destroy these invisible particles of death. He recalled that a chlorinated lime solution was highly effective at eliminating the foul odor of decomposition. He reasoned that if it could destroy the smell, it could also destroy the material causing the smell. In May of 1847, he instituted a new mandatory policy in the first clinic. No doctor or student was to enter the maternity ward without first washing their hands thoroughly in a basin of chlorinated lime until all trace of the cadaverous smell was gone. He was relentless, posting signs and personally standing at the entrance to the ward, ensuring every single person complied. The results were not just positive, they were miraculous. The effect was immediate and staggering. In April 1847, the month before the policy was implemented, the mortality rate in the first clinic had been a horrifying 18.3%. After the hand-washing rule began in May, the rate dropped to 2.2%. In the months that followed, it fell even further, at times dropping to 0. He had done it. He had solved the mystery and vanquished the killer. For the first time in years, the first clinic was as safe as or even safer than the second.
Ignaz Semmelweis had saved countless lives with the simple, profound act of washing his hands. He expected to be celebrated, to be hailed as a hero. Instead, he was met with a wall of denial, arrogance, and outright hostility. The medical establishment of Vienna did not see a savior, they saw an accuser. Semmelweis's theory, however well supported by the data, was a profound insult to their professional dignity. He was implicitly stating that they, the esteemed gentlemen of medicine, were unclean. He was blaming them for the deaths of their own patients. It was an outrageous, offensive accusation. How could their educated, respectable hands be the source of such horror? Furthermore, his theory was insultingly simple. These were men who believed in complex, systemic causes for disease, in miasmas and atmospheric conditions. The idea that the epidemic could be stopped by something as mundane as hand-washing seemed preposterous, unscientific, and beneath them. His personality didn't help his cause. Semmelweis was not a diplomat. He was abrasive, impatient, and utterly convinced of his own correctness. He saw his colleagues' resistance not as scientific skepticism, but as willful ignorance and murder. He openly criticized his superiors and failed to present his findings in a way that could be easily accepted by the scientific community. He delayed publishing a comprehensive book on his work for over a decade, relying instead on letters and angry word of mouth. He was an outsider, a Hungarian in an Austrian institution, and his radical idea threatened the very foundation of his peers' medical practice and their sense of self. To accept Semmelweis's discovery would be to admit that they had spent years, even decades, unknowingly killing the very people they had sworn to protect. It was a truth too terrible for them to face, and so they chose to attack the messenger. They called him a fanatic, a madman. They ridiculed his cadaverous particles. And when his contract at the Vienna hospital came up for renewal, it was not extended. Ignaz Semmelweis, the man who had solved the riddle of childbed fever, was unceremoniously forced out. His life-saving discovery cast aside.
Block 3. Semmelweis's tragic legacy. Driven from Vienna in 1850, a bitter and disillusioned Ignaz Semmelweis returned to his native Hungary. He took an unpaid position at the small St. Rochus Hospital in Pest, where he was once again put in charge of a maternity ward riddled with puerperal fever. Without the political resistance he faced in Vienna, he immediately implemented his hand-washing protocols. And just as before, the results were undeniable. He took a ward where the death rate was catastrophic and, almost overnight, virtually eliminated childbed fever, with the mortality rate dropping to below 1%. He had proven his theory correct not once, but twice, in 2 different cities, in 2 different hospitals. The evidence was irrefutable. Yet, the wider European medical community remained stubbornly deaf to his message. For the next decade, Semmelweis fought a lonely, desperate war against ignorance. He corresponded with leading obstetricians across Europe, presenting his statistics and pleading with them to adopt his simple, life-saving technique. His pleas were almost universally ignored, dismissed, or met with condescending rebuttals. The letters he received back were filled with excuses and alternative theories, all of which protected the fragile egos of the medical elite. They couldn't or wouldn't see the truth. The constant rejection began to take a severe toll on Semmelweis. His passion curdled into a corrosive rage. In 1861, he finally published his magnum opus, a book titled The Etiology, Concept, and Prophylaxis of Childbed Fever. It should have been his ultimate vindication, a clear and concise presentation of his monumental discovery. Instead, the book was a reflection of his tormented mind, dense, rambling, poorly organized, and filled with furious polemical attacks on his detractors. Rather than winning converts, it alienated the very people he needed to convince. As the years wore on, his behavior grew more erratic and his anger more explosive. He began writing furious, desperate open letters to the most prominent professors of obstetrics in Europe, foregoing scientific decorum entirely. He didn't just call them wrong, he called them irresponsible, negligent, and direct participants in a massacre. "I denounce you before God and the world as a murderer," he wrote to one, "and the history of childbed fever will not do you an injustice." He was a man screaming a vital truth into a storm of indifference, and the strain was breaking him. He suffered from severe depression, became publicly disruptive, and his once brilliant mind began to unravel. His family and few remaining colleagues watched in despair as the man who had saved so many mothers seemed unable to save himself. The end was swift and brutal. In July 1865, his wife and colleagues, concerned for his sanity, lured him to a Vienna insane asylum under the pretense of visiting a new medical institute. When he realized the deception, he tried to flee. He was captured by several guards, beaten severely, and forced into a straitjacket. Confined to a dark cell, he was left to languish. During the struggle, he had sustained a wound on his hand, which soon became infected. Just 2 weeks after being committed, Ignaz Semmelweis died of sepsis, blood poisoning. In the most tragic and profound of ironies, the man who discovered the cure for puerperal fever died from a nearly identical infection, a victim of the very same invisible killer he had dedicated his life to defeating. He was 47 years old. Semmelweis's death went largely unnoticed. His life-saving work seemed destined to be a forgotten footnote in medical history. But just a few years later, the scientific world was revolutionized. In France, Louis Pasteur developed his germ theory of disease, proving that invisible microorganisms were the true cause of infection. In Scotland, Joseph Lister, inspired by Pasteur's work, pioneered antiseptic surgery, using carbolic acid to sterilize instruments and clean wounds, dramatically reducing post-operative mortality. The scientific framework that Semmelweis had lacked was finally in place. His cadaverous particles were given a name: bacteria. His observations were no longer just compelling statistics, they were scientifically validated fact. The medical world had finally caught up to the truth he had seen 2 decades earlier. Posthumously, Ignaz Semmelweis was vindicated. He is now universally hailed as a pioneer of antiseptic policy, and is remembered by the noble title he so rightly earned, the Savior of Mothers. His story is a powerful, painful lesson, a testament to the courage it takes to challenge established dogma, and a stark reminder that the path of a truly revolutionary idea is often walked alone.